11th question, this is going to be yours, Karin. Have the state's subsidies in alternative energy produced a return on investment that justify their continued subsidies?
You know, and this I think, we've got the moratorium right now on the nuclear energy down in Hastings. I think we need to open up all of our alternative energies here, or our natural resources here in the state. I think that would help us here. That's all I have on that one.
Okay, Julie.
Well, the state subsidies are in kind of two primary areas. One is ethanol, that's been on the books for a long time, and the other is in some subsidy to wind and other alternative kinds of generation in the state. In terms of the ethanol subsidy, pretty much they have gone by the wayside now. During the deficit years, as much as I want to keep commitments to farmers, I think they should have been on the docket for considering for elimination at the time. They were not. They pretty much have now been phased out. They were to last for a certain period of time when the industry was set up, and they have run their course now, and I wouldn't support going back to more ethanol subsidies in the future, although we have new, interesting other biofuels coming down the pike that I am very much supportive of as well. And our ethanol industry is doing very fine on its own without those subsidies, and has been for a number of years. In terms of alternative energy, obviously, when I was in the legislature, with the support of Governor Pawlenty, and after many years of efforts on a bipartisan basis, we passed in Minnesota a renewable energy standard for the state to have our electric utilities by 2020 and for Excel by 2025 to generate a good portion of their power from alternative renewable sources. There just recently have come some reports have come out on that topic and how they're doing. So far, the entire sector is meeting their goals, both in terms of conservation and in terms of alternative energy generation, and those efforts seem to be bearing fruit, and all the parties involved in those original agreements seem to be happy with the outcomes at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next question goes back to Julie first. What reasons do you have for supporting or opposing the voter ID amendment?
Okay. I oppose the voter ID amendment. I believe that a major change to voting practices in Minnesota, even if well-intentioned for the purpose of having greater voting integrity in our state, should always be something that has bipartisan support, number one, and this had no bipartisan support. And secondly, that it should always be done at the legislative level and not put in the Constitution. The way we vote, the technology used for voting is evolving rapidly. We may be having online voting within 10 years or so. Putting language in the Constitution is an appropriate way to do it. It's not flexible to respond to that. I have been open in the past to, if the people of Minnesota think there are real issues with regard to voting integrity, to having some type of voter ID if it was supported bipartisanly and shown not to suppress voters in this state, and that had a system of identification that was flexible, that accommodates students, the military, and seniors, and all the other groups that may be affected of this. The current proposal does not achieve those goals. I do believe it will suppress votes, and I do believe the particular pieces of information provided regarding the problem that underlies it are not accurate in their portrayal of what type of integrity issues we have in our voting system today.
Thank you. Karin?
Well, it's already on the ballot, so we can't go backwards. And it is up to the people of Minnesota to decide if they feel that people should have to show a photo ID, a voter ID when they go to vote. I do support it because you have to show a voter ID to buy a can of spray paint at Home Depot. You have to show voter ID to pick up your Advil cold and sinus at Walgreens. It only makes common sense. My mom's thought she's been showing her ID for the last 50 years to vote. She probably does, but I think it does just make common sense. It is common sense to have to show an ID, and we do have to be careful when we are in session in 2013 that we do protect our military and our veterans and our elderly and our students in the wording of how they get their IDs and who has to show them and how.
Okay. Next question goes back to Karin first. What would be your top 3 priorities if you get elected this fall?
Well, the top priority this is what I'm hearing at the door, and this is what I've heard when I've been working in the community for the last 10 or the last 4 years, and in what I do in real estate. It's jobs and the economy are the number one issue on everybody's minds. And what we have to do is really help our businesses create jobs. What's happened to our businesses here in the state of Minnesota, you're having the governors of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin calling our businesses here and asking them. I know my brother-in-law did move his business to Wisconsin, asking to move their businesses to these other states because they are much more tax-friendly. We are not a tax-friendly state. We are the 11th highest corporate tax rate in the United States, and we are the 4th highest income tax rate. So it's not a business-friendly state. We are tax-burdened. So what we have to do, and this will be my priority at the Capitol, is to help our businesses create jobs, and that will get our economy turned around. And to do that too, we need to lessen the regulations on our businesses, because there's Minnesota Oncology. I went to visit them this summer, and Minnesota Oncology wants to expand their cancer treatment facilities. Right now there's just a few cancer treatment facilities. So somebody from Egan has to travel from there to St. Paul to get chemotherapy or radiation. What they want to do is expand and have little satellite offices throughout the neighborhoods. So it's a lot. And if you've had anybody with cancer, it is a long drive. Even if it's 7 miles, it's a long ways. So Minnesota Oncology is not allowed to expand and have these satellite offices in different communities because of the regulations. So we need to lessen our regulations, and we need to ease the tax burdens on our businesses so we can help to create more jobs, which will stimulate the economy.
Thank you. Julie?
Well, this will be a budget session that we'll be going into, so our requirement as legislators will be first and foremost to balance the budget. And as I indicated earlier, we will be facing a real $4.5 billion deficit. The forecast from the economists is $1.1 billion on the forecasted deficit, another $1 billion related to inflation not accounted for on the expenditure side. We're the only state in the United States or the federal government that does not do that, so that's a real issue as well. And then secondly, paying back the school shift and having a real plan to do so, which did not come from the Republicans in this last session, a real one. This is intricately linked to the second two priorities, though, improving the business climate in the state of Minnesota and trying to slow the growth in healthcare costs in the state of Minnesota. The budget balancing, growing healthcare costs, growing health and human service costs, as I mentioned earlier, is the number one growth area in the budget that's continuing to throw it out of balance. Every other aspect of the state budget, other than maybe veterans and public safety and a few things have been kind of held even in this last decade, have taken real cuts in real terms to those portions of the budget, particularly higher education and to some extent K-12 as well. So in trying to come up with that big deal, that compromise with those moderates to balance that budget, we need this modernizing tax reform that includes as part of it a major business climate improvement for the state as part of that grand bargain to bring down some of those business taxes and to grow jobs in the state as a result of it. And also part of that overall agreement needs to be specific plans aimed at lowering the healthcare cost growth in our state. All three of those elements are dovetailed together, and we need to address all three, both for the health of our state budget and for the business climate of our state and for our families' budgets and vitality.
Thank you. Actually,